Welcome back. We have with us in the studio Mr. Anis Aclimandos, who is the president of the American Chamber of Commerce. In addition to that, he is the chairman of an institute called EFE, which is enforcing or education for employment, an organization that is entrusted with preparing or educating people, getting them ready for employment, which is something that we will really shed some light on. And he is a chairman of one of the leading consultancy firms based in Washington, D.C. A pleasure to have you with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Before we start, maybe because you're involved very much with American politics, not only in the capacity of the chairman of the AmCham or the president of the AmCham, but also with your consultancy and work in the U.S. Did you expect Donald Trump to hit the White House?
It was
honestly.
He had a slip. I mean, it was not obvious that he was going to win at all. I thought that the machine around Hillary Clinton will make her win no matter what. But it's an American process. It's a democracy. He won. It might be better for Egypt.
Is it better?
In my opinion, yes.
Why?
Why? It's a good question. You know that President Obama did not receive President Sisi in 3 years in Washington. They met around the AGM in New York, but he was never invited to Washington.
Yes.
For reasons that they consider that they will waste political capital or whatever, and I think it would have been more of the same. On top of it, I know that some of her aides and herself are convinced that about 30% of Egyptians belong to the Muslim Brotherhood movement, and that that clan has to be included in the system, regardless of what we went through, that they refuse to acknowledge sometimes. So I hope that Mr. Trump, having a business background, having a Congress that is Republican and a Senate that is Republican, will be enforced and will be guided and better advised on Egypt. He had a very good meeting with President Sisi when we were in New York. I think that he has a lot of respect for Sisi. He has a lot of understanding for what Egypt went through and what the Middle East has gone through. And it might be better for us. I'm sure it's better for us.
Egypt is undergoing a lot of economic reforms.
Yes.
For the average layman, of course, it doesn't sound very pleasant. I mean, one day we wake up, there is a flotation of the Egyptian pound. The next day, before we go to sleep, we hear that subsidy has been further removed from fuel, thus increasing the pricing. The only good news, so to speak, yet it is news that really the average layman will not be relating to, which is the IMF loan. Before we go into the IMF loan, are we on the right track? When you look at the reform program that we've done, the subsidy lifting, the flotation of the Egyptian pound, are we on the right track?
100%. Okay. There's no question about it. When you look at the Egyptian budget, we had 25% of the budget going to subsidies, 25% going to debt repayment, 25% going to government employees, salaries, and you only had 25% of your budget left for development and infrastructure projects and anything you can think of, services. It's not healthy. We had reached levels of debt and a percentage of our GDP paid in repayment, used for repayments, that are not healthy and not conducive to any development or growth. So we are definitely on the right track. On top of it, you can never attract foreign direct investment into the country if you have two prices. It's impossible. Wise investors, and we only want the wise investments. We're not looking for hot money or people who come and go. they always look at exit before they look at entry. And you cannot plan your exits, you cannot plan your operations when you have two prices. It's impossible. Those who are here had a problem, so nobody would come in.
Now, since you're dealing with a lot of the international community, do you hear people after those changes in IMF loan, do you hear people saying that, well, we feel that it is safe to come and invest in Egypt?
Yes, I mean, the ratings of Egypt are improving. Those in the know economically are very happy with Egypt. We're getting more investors or potential investors interested in listening because you have a system that is driven by market forces. So it will take some time. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but it depends who you talk to. I mean, if you're talking to the international community, yes, they see us under a better light. They think we're on the right track. And if you talk to the layman on the street, they only see the negative side, which exists. I mean, there is a price hike, particularly for importers. But in real terms, you had a price that was much higher on the black market. And any trader who was obtaining his currency through the black market was charging it to the consumer anyway. So we were paying full price anyway.
Yes.
Now it might stabilize lower than when the black market was taking us for no reason. You end up killing the speculation in a way and having a transparent system which is much healthier. It was way overdue.
We cannot ignore the latest happening, which is the US elections. We have a businessman in the White House, and a very successful businessman. He is very set in his ways. He's not young. He's very, very set in his ways. He has really a good success story under his belt. And in his campaign, there is one thing that was very common in most of his statements, which is there is a price tag for everything. He will do nothing for free. He will not allow China to mow down American economy anymore, take over the place of the American workforce, etc., etc., etc. What are we expecting with Trump? Because the world really is standing by watchful.
You have to realize that what you say during a campaign is very different from what you do when you
Once you hit the White House.
The administration is a machine, and you can't really do what you want to do or what you think you want to do. And before you get in, you really don't have the information concerning
Even if you're a successful businessman? Not a politician.
Well, he had his ups and downs. I mean, he faced bankruptcy a few times. He managed to get out of it. He is a businessman, no question about it. If somebody who has all this money is not successful, I don't know what the definition of success would be. But what he wants to do was based on how he feels. Once you get the White House, you have a system that controls you. You have reports that come to you. You acquire much more information. What we have seen after a very short meeting with President Obama is that he already started talking about health insurance under a different tone. He started talking about immigration issues in a different light. You start facing reality. You get papers in front of you, you have a budget to balance, you have things to do, you have international considerations that are not to be ignored. So you can't just do what you want to do or what you feel like doing.
Well, one of the issues, I mean, let's talk about issues that are really of concern to us in this region. One of the issues is what is taking place in the region, which he criticized. He strongly criticized, actually he slammed Hillary Clinton for policies which she was part and parcel of in Iraq and in Libya and in Syria. Do you think this will change once he hits the White House? Especially since the American taxpayer footed quite a large bill in those events in this region. Will he continue on the same wavelength, do you think? Will he change the tone?
To a great extent, the damage has been done in the Middle East.
Yes.
We're surrounded by destruction. They paid a tremendous amount of money. I don't want to quote figures, although there are lots of figures floating around in Iraq. You cannot unscramble scrambled eggs. I mean, Iraq is a mess and will be a mess for a long time. Syria is not much better.
No.
Libya is not much better. The Sudan is kind of iffy. Yemen is a mess. You have shaky governments all around us. I think this is one of our strengths, is that if you're looking for an interlocutor in the Middle East, you don't have many choices. Egypt is still a stable country with a stable government, with an army, with institutions in place, with educated people they can talk to. So it will play to our advantage.
Okay.
But you ask me if things will change in the Middle East.
Will the U.S. policy change? This is what he says in his, but as we know, it was in his campaign, but he seems to have very strong position against continuing this war in the region or supporting a continuation of this war.
Well, the war is over. The mess is what we have to live with. The war proper is over. What we have to fight is terrorism.
Will he help clear the mess?
It's a very unusual situation. When you listen to the news, some people don't think about what we're saying sometimes. You have the Iraqi army working with the American army to find a non-state. You're fighting ISIS, which is a non-state. It's a very difficult situation. It's hitting not only the Arab world, it's hitting Europe. You can be on the promenade in Nice and be hit. Paris was hit, London was hit. So you cannot, it's very difficult to fight an ideology, and you don't fight an ideology with an army. It's a very complex problem, and it's bound to change. It's not sustainable, it cannot continue, it's crazy.
The investment opportunity, do you sense that as a businessman, does he see the potential, the economic potential, not just the strategic and the political weight of Egypt in this region, but that this country has an economic potential?
Of course. I mean, we have 25% of the Arab population in Egypt. It's a consumer market par excellence. We don't produce what we need, which is not very good for us.
It's catastrophic.
It's a great opportunity for the others. So the defensive industries in Egypt will continue to survive. I mean, people will continue to eat, buy medication, put clothes on their back. Transportation is going to continue because by definition, you don't consume anything that is produced where it's produced, neither agriculture nor industry. So it is an opportunity. I think that Egypt will rebound very well. I think we're on the right track. But I'm sure that as a businessman, Mr. Trump will see that. And the opportunities are there for who wants to take them. If you follow what happened at the chamber a few weeks ago on the 24th, 25th of October, we had 54 companies come to Egypt. It was a very solid delegation. There are 9 of them that who had never been in Egypt before. There are investment funds that were here. There were lawyers that were here. And they were not coming on a pleasure trip. They obviously came because they see potential. They invested their time and money, which is nothing, coming to explore how we're going to go about it. And I think that the recent developments of last week, the flotation, the lifting of the subsidy, makes us for real again. I mean, you cannot...
And the IMF loan, it's giving you a clean bill of health, or not?
Definitely. It's a vote of confidence. The IMF has based its loan on an Egyptian program. The IMF has 189 countries. They don't dream up programs for every country. We submitted a program where it was obvious, or what we claimed, is that we have a $30 billion deficit for the coming 3 years. They give us 12 of them based on conditionalities. The other 18 were divided over 3 years, so we had to come up with 6 billion as one of the preconditions. But this is not the important part. The important part is that once you have that vote of confidence, you're going to attract money from other financial institutions. And I don't want to start naming institutions because they haven't done it yet. But some institutions have pledged money, conditional upon the signing of the IMF. So our reserves will go up, and then your market will be more solid. So signing the IMF is a control mechanism. I mean, if you look at the mandate of the IMF, they look at the countries that are in risk, the countries that have deficits, and come to mitigate that risk and help you come out of it. And they have learned their lesson. I mean, there is no recipe, one fits all. I mean,
Yes,
it has to be adapted to Egypt. And I think I'm repeating myself, but they based their loan and their program on an Egyptian program.
Not as some are saying that they imposed a reform program on the country.
No, they imposed the conditionalities because we
To
studied
safeguard
them
their interests.
together. It's not their interest, it's our interest. It's in
Okay.
Egypt's interest. I mean, if I give you a weapon that you don't know how to use,
You will
you're in
shoot
trouble.
yourself.
So they have studied the case in collaboration with Egypt and decided that if you don't lift part of the subsidies, it won't work. If you don't have the ammunition in the bank to back up your currency, it won't work. If you don't have what you need to fill the gap in your foreign exchange machine, it won't work. So they've put the conditionalities not just because they believe in them, because it's how your system will work.
Do you have any investors talking about the investment law, that they're concerned that we still have not come out with an investment law? Do you see it as
The draft is
a
on the
problem?
table. The draft, I think, is a good one. I have some concerns about parts of it, but overall, it's a very good change. I think it's good that we're coming up with a new law. I think that trying to weld and work with the old one was a patch job that was not easy and not conducive to success. So we have a new law on the table. The good thing is that you have that investment committee looking at it. The private sector is included. The people who will benefit or be hurt by this law have a chance to discuss it. We've been invited by several organizations in Egypt to voice our opinions. There are lots of people who are participating. So hopefully it won't be a one-sided, lopsided kind of attitude that is not conducive to success. I think that you have to realize that in many countries there is no Ministry of Investment and no investment law. The system controls itself. The banks control whatever is banking, the trade institutions control the trade. So the investment law is needed because we need some hand-holding at the beginning to make sure that we overcome. There are things that we have a lot of experience in that are bad. We're bureaucrats by nature. We have problems.
Do you think this law will cut this bureaucracy or further increase it? Because sometimes
No,
the law...
further increase it, definitely not. It's well crafted.
Okay.
And if you have direct access, you're curtailing, you're breaking the cycle with corruption and bureaucracy.
Does it have loopholes? Because some are saying it has lots of loopholes.
Don't know if I would say lots. It's a major step forward. It's much better in many ways. In my opinion, it's too big. It's a little bit cumbersome
Confusing.
sometimes. But it doesn't have lots of loopholes. Can it be approved upon? Yes.
Can it be built upon?
Definitely. I mean, nothing is in concrete. I mean, you always have amendments, but if you start on the right foot and you don't have to do major changes as you go, it's much better. So I hope that before it comes out, it will be worked with a little bit.
One of the issues that whenever we talk about any development in Egypt or reform is that we need to reform our human resource bases. And here I touch on the title of the Education for Employment institution. Even though you have an advantage, you really have gold. And I don't mean gold literal, and we do.
Yeah, I know exactly what you
I'm
mean.
talking about the human resources. I mean, this is really something that if exercised or built to the potential, especially since you have the majority of the population really are in the lower age or the young age. Yet we have a serious issue with educational, especially vocational training.
It's not necessarily for the educational. What I call it is that we need employability programs. We have a major gap between the market needs and the training that the kids get. So we crank out of universities thousands of people every year.
Yes.
And then you have an employment fair, you put 20,000 job requests on the table, employers who need people to work, and then you have 80,000 people applying and you can only fill 2. Because what they know is not what is needed. So it's demand-driven education that has been lacking for a long time. We get people out of schools that don't know where they can get a job, that didn't study what would get them a job. So I think that the beauty of the program that you're referring to, Education for Employment, is that you start with the employer first, and then you become a tailor. So I come to you and I say, Dina, you own an hotel, and your hotel needs 50 people with these qualifications. I'm going to train 60. And I make you a stakeholder, so you review the curriculum, you supervise the training of these people, and then they have a job when they graduate. Instead of getting a certificate to frame at home and no job. I mean, you get a certificate to stand in the unemployment line.
But isn't that the role of, I mean, people pay thousands in universities. Isn't that the role of the universities? I mean, aren't we talking that maybe the programs the curriculums need to be revised? And I'm not saying that institutions like this should not be working, because you definitely need further training, but it seems that our graduates really are not equipped.
You're absolutely
with what the market needs.
We have an accumulation of people who have learned what is not sellable. I mean, if you talk to a good percentage of taxi drivers in Cairo, they graduated from economics or accounting or whatever, and they're driving a cab. Had they learned how to maintain the cab, have they learned how to work in the hospitality industry, how to run their cab, how to work with the new companies that are using different skills, they would have been much better off. But we went through a stage where we had some kind of hang-ups and stigma about everybody had to have a certificate, you had to have a college degree. Whether you're going to need it or not, it didn't matter, but you had to be a university graduate. I think we're becoming more pragmatic. We're over that. Our universities have to make an effort. Like most universities around the world, they get business people who come and talk to the students. And I tell them, if you graduate in this discipline, we need you.
To know A, B, and C.
But if we graduate hundreds of thousands of people in a certain discipline that is not needed, they end up doing something else. So it's a waste of government resources. It's a waste of the students' time. And I think the most dangerous part is that you raise their expectations, and then they fall on nothing.
This is a very dangerous.
So with EFE, Education for Employment, what they do, it's an NGO, it doesn't make money, it spends money on students. You know that they graduate with a job in their pocket. They're learning, you bought a new machine, I get some.
When do you take them? After they graduate or before they graduate?
Usually we try to get underprivileged kids who have a certificate and didn't get a job for 6 months.
So fresh graduates?
If you don't get a job for 6 months, very frustrated.
Okay.
So you take those people and you tailor them to fit a job, and they get a job.
In what disciplines?
You can do anything. You can.
I mean, do you
models.
take engineers, for example, or economists,
sure.
or lawyers?
We've trained people in the textile industry. We've trained people for the banking industry. We've trained people for merchandising. There are lots of areas that need people. And the frustrating thing I find in Egypt today is that you find people who want jobs, who need jobs, but they don't want to work. I mean, it's true. And sometimes they don't want to work because they don't see the added value. Why would I work? I mean, what they get is hand to mouth, and they manage to survive, and they don't want to be in a structured framework, so they prefer to drive a tuk-tuk or
Does EFE help in changing this perception or concept?
We try. We need to have 1,000 EFEs in Egypt. There are other companies that have done training centers to train their people, and even if we train somebody and then he goes to work somewhere else, A job is a job. Well, I don't mind.
What advice would you be giving the young generation right now? Not just the Egyptians, young Egyptians in Egypt, but maybe even young Egyptians living abroad, and what is needed right now in Egypt?
Well, you've touched upon something very interesting. When you take the Egyptians abroad, they're very successful. I mean, if you go to the Gulf, they love to employ Egyptians because once they're in the system, they're highly trainable.
And they're very efficient.
And very efficient because they're bound by a system, and there is no ma'alish, and there is no manana, and there is no tolerance. I mean, it's zero tolerance. When you go work in a multinational abroad, you either produce or you're out. So it really tells you that Egyptians are trainable, Egyptians can be productive, and you look at many successful Egyptian firms in Egypt that are very successful. I mean, there is one statistic that is quite interesting. We have 2,000 members at the American Chamber of Commerce in Egypt. None has left during the bad 4 years. It means that they make money. And they make money because they have a relative advantage. And by and large, they employ Egyptians. They may have a few managers, a few
But
trainers.
mostly it's Egyptians.
Over 98% of people working for multinationals in Egypt are
Egyptians, definitely.
It means that you can. It's a question of management and training and zero tolerance.
System.
Yeah, it's a system.
Mr. Anis, a pleasure to have you with us as usual. Unfortunately, our time is up, and definitely we'll in future shows discuss more. How can we build the future Egyptian mind, and how can we maybe involve more the Egyptians living abroad? Maybe we can rely on organizations like EFE and AmCham to do this.
Well, EFE is in Egypt right now. Anyway, thank you for having me.
A pleasure to have you with us. We'll continue with this evening's debate right after this, so please stay with us.